SBC Media.
Brazil, a global economic powerhouse, deeply passionate about sports, and now home to one of the hottest markets in gaming. And we're giving it the full SBC treatment. Join industry leaders, market experts, and all the major players in the country for 3 days of content, exhibition, and epic networking at the first ever SBC Summit Rio.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of iGaming Daily. It's sponsored by the SBC Summit Rio. My name is Andrew McCarron. I'm the Managing Director of SBC. And with me today, we've got a very special guest. We have Paul Buck, who is the CEO and founder of Epic Risk Management. Paul, thanks for joining us today.
Nice to be here, Andy. Nice to see you.
No, good to be seen. And the reason you're invited on, Paul, is because you've got quite a big anniversary for Epic. Do you want to talk us through how you're celebrating it?
Yep, sure. So Epic is 10. Which is sort of hard to fathom where that last decade's gone, but we were officially incorporated on the November the 19th, 2013. So we're just literally just gone past our 10th anniversary. So something we're pretty proud of here at Epic, both in terms of what we've done today and also what we've got coming up in the future. So we've got a few things lined up. We've got an event in the National Football Museum in Manchester in a couple of weeks, where we can get a lot of people together who played a big part in that journey over the last decade. So 10 years old for Epic.
I wasn't sure if the National Football Museum would be a kind of hard place for you to go, considering it used to be at your beloved Preston North End's ground.
Well, there is that, but I don't know if you've been recently or been at all, but it's a pretty impressive venue, and obviously quite central. So we're looking forward to that. We've got over 100 people who are going to be there, and I said most of them are people who've played a real big part in getting Epic to 10 years. And put it frankly, I don't think many people would have given us much chance to get into one, let alone 10. So pretty proud of it.
I mean, just for our audience, Paul, can you just talk us through, how you created Epic, how you found the need, and how it's entwined with your personal journey?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my relationship with gambling wasn't a great one ultimately. After starting betting at university in the first week, and treating gambling as entertainment and very much being in control of gambling for the first 7 or 8 years, for the next 10, it really wasn't. So I transacted nearly £5 million across 93 different betting accounts, lost over £1 million whilst working for Europe's largest bank, and it ended up in a couple of pretty big rock bottoms attached to that. And it was really at that time you're thinking, what do? Do you go out and get a job and do whatever in that field, or do you go out there and actually use your experience of gambling-related harm, of gambling addiction and everything that goes with it, and try and stop it happening to other people? And that's really where we were 10 years ago in 2013. It was making that decision to go and try and put prevention at the heart of everything, whilst acknowledging that the vast majority of people can gamble, stay in control of time, money, cognition. There is that small percentage, but significant number of people who can't. And let's try and prevent the harm. Let's try and prevent people suffering the harm that I did and others around me did. So that's really where Epic came from. It's education, prevention, identification, control. And I think the USP, if you like, or the difference with Epic is I was pretty determined to put lived experience at the heart of everything that we do. And we've now worked in 30 countries. We've got 46 employees, of which 24 of those are people who have really suffered serious gambling addiction and come out the other side. And they're from a wide range of occupations, such as sport and business and finance and all different areas, really. And it's just really, putting that at the heart of everything we do, both our training products, our consultancy, and also the education and awareness we do in the highest risk sectors.
I mean, what can you tell us about the first couple of years? Because I remember we've had a conversation in the past, and you said that when you were first starting off, you wanted everybody to have lived experience with gambling harm. I suppose as you've got bigger, it's been trickier to keep that policy as 100%. I was reading something earlier on today that it was a deal with the professional rugby bodies that really sort of kick-started things. How did that first deal come about?
Yeah, so when I sort of set up, as I said, sort of 10 years ago, it was, gambling wasn't really seen as kind of the issue it is now in many ways. There wasn't really the same focus around it. There wasn't really the same understanding of what gambling addiction was or gambling harm was. And, for a couple of years, I was sort of just working out with companies and the different sectors, what needs to be done with this? What kind of risk does it present if it gets out of control? And what needs to be done about it, and how can we sort of provide those solutions? So for a couple of years, we were really doing a lot of research and market analysis and things like that. And, I had a couple of guys who were working with me. There was a guy called Mark Potter, who's still with me now, an ex-professional rugby player, and a couple of others. But, really, it was 2016 that we really started getting clients, if you like, or started doing the work. And you're right, the Rugby Players Association, which is the player body for professional rugby in the UK, was the first contract that we did. And they basically heard me tell my story one day and said, look, we need every rugby player in the UK, professional rugby player, to hear this, because rugby had just gone professional, rugby union. So players had gone from playing amateurly and for fun, if you like, to now getting paid some serious money for doing the same thing. And there's obviously competitive nature there. There's injury, there's contract terminations or not getting the next contract. So there's all sorts of triggers in sport. And the Rugby Players Association just said, look, we want you to talk and tell that same story to everybody. And it kind of snowballed from there, really, with the English Football League, and we're working with Sky Bet as the main sponsor. And we now work pretty much across every sport in the UK and in the US. And the journey's been an interesting one, because we wanted the relatability. So we wanted, people who had suffered that gambling addiction or that gambling harm to actually be the ones going out there and doing the work. So for the first 10 people at Epic, 9 of them were literally that, people who suffered harm, who are now ready to tell their story and try and prevent harm for others. And that kind of evolved, really. And now, as I said, we still have around 50 to 55% of our team are people who've suffered that harm. But there are also a number of people now in the business who haven't. So they're people from, professional sport, from learning and development, from HR, from comms, from all different parts of the body as the business has grown. But you need there around that kind of lived experience story as well, as we've developed the proposition and as we've developed our kind of client base. So it has evolved over the last 10 years from initially being that storytelling to now being a serious business, if you like.
So, I mean, when you do go out and speak to the professionals in this way, I mean, how does that manifest? Is it just a lecture? Is it a seminar? How many would in a room? What does that look like from your perspective?
It varies. It varies sector by sector, and it varies sort of sport by sport, and even club by club, really. Ultimately, if you're looking at sport, which is probably what we're best known for, even though it's only one of kind of 6 sectors that we will work in, the others being financial services, the gambling industry itself, armed forces, criminal justice, and education of kids. So, but if you're looking purely at sport, it can vary, really. The light bulb moment and the first session will always be that lived experience facilitator who goes into a club, mainly with first teams, but also academies and club staff and the wider stakeholders at a football club or a rugby club or a cricket club or a cricket team. And they will sort of tell that story. And often that's the first time that population, who are a high-risk demographic because of all the different reasons we talked about before, will have actually looked into the eyes of somebody who has been in their shoes or been in their dressing room just like them. And as actually, this is a thing that's like halted their career or meant that they've not completed their potential within their sport or something like that. And, there's been some really powerful messages. We've got a guy called Scott Davis who used to play for Reading and Oxford and Wycombe. We've got a guy called Mark Williams who used to play for Wrexham and Wales and so on. And Mark, for instance, Mark went into Wrexham's first team 2-3 weeks ago, and he's in there, and he's someone who's played for Wrexham, he's played for Wales. He probably should have gone further in the game, but he's in there and he's telling them, this is the thing that stopped me doing that. And the reaction from Wrexham and the team there, which I believe is going to be on the Netflix program at some point.
I think it's Disney, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, is it that what it is? Yeah. That's the light bulb moment. And I think a big thing of the evolution of the last 10 years is, what do we do next? It's all very well going in and sort of telling a story, and that's incredibly powerful, and it's the first thing that we do always. But what do we do next? And you can't just keep going in and telling the same story, or sending in somebody with the next story, or whatever. So the evolution of our proposition has been huge, particularly over the last 3 or 4 years, in terms of really getting the players involved in the sessions, looking at true education in there rather than just awareness raising. The comeback from the clubs has been brilliant. At the start, if you look at the EFL program, we were cold calling all 72 clubs and saying, can we come in and do this session? Now, as we go in year 6 this year, they're saying to us, what can we do next year? Can we book you in for next year already? So I think clubs and sports and sectors are seeing the benefits of this kind of prevention program, this kind of education and awareness program. And we'll constantly evolve the proposition to make sure that it stays fresh and the story gets across in different ways.
I mean, as you mentioned, probably more high-profile stuff is with the sports. But like you say, you've got armed forces, criminal justice, financial services, and educating the kids and the gambling industry itself. Are those sectors open and receptive to the work you do on prevention as well? I'm thinking specifically the gambling industry. Do they recognise that they're a high-risk sector? And how was their approach?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because when I was putting this together, or Epic together 10 years ago, the gambling industry weren't the sector, but were on the business plan. I'd had my own relationship with them, I guess, for a decade or longer. But also, I suppose in my mind, it was, would they really want to work with someone who's out there doing what we're doing? Why would they want to work with me? Is it too big a risk? There was a big reputation of the gambling industry, but they were very closed to things like this. That's going to affect the bottom line, that's going to affect profits, etc. And it was really a meeting with the Gambling Commission, Sarah Harrison, who was the CEO at the time.
The notorious Sarah Harrison.
Yeah, and she, and to be fair, she was the first one who was really open to talking about this, and probably the one who's had the most interaction with us over the course of the decade. And she got us into a board meeting, or she got me and one of the guys into a board meeting and said, look, we love what you're doing in armed forces, criminal justice, sport, etc. But why are you not working in the sector where most harm exists? And I was kind of like, well, where do you meet? We're working with kids, 50,000 kids every year. We're working with sport. We're working with finance. Where do you meet? And she said, well, and I remember the words to this day. She sort of said to me, she said, we can tell them what to do, and we can tell them, we can fine them if they don't do it, or we can sanction them if they don't do it. But why are you not the ones who are going in and showing them the, how and why? But this is important. And this was in 2017, so it was 6 years ago now. And it kind of, my first reaction was, nah, that's not something A, I want to do, and B, they want us to do. But it kept coming back to me about the words that she said, actually, you can stop harm at source. What's better way to actually go and prevent harm, if that's what the raison d'etre of the business is, than going in and trying to stop harm at source by working with those who are operating with gambling. So I Googled responsible gambling and who was the best at it, and the same name kept coming up, a woman called Mary Spinello, who I'm sure who works over at Kindred and has headed that up. And I sort of just contacted her and said, look, this is what we're doing. Is this something you'd be interested in as a company in terms of having a look at? And I think within 3 or 4 weeks, we'd signed a contract to go and start working with Kindred over in Malta and so on. And I was just amazed how open they were to this kind of thing. Yes, we're a business. Yes, we want to make money. But at the same time, there's nobody in this business who wants to cause harm. And come and educate us, come and show us what that means, come and show us how we can reduce that.
So you were surprised that you were pushing an open door, really?
Yeah, in all truthfulness. And the relationship with the gambling industry has evolved over the last 5 or 6 years. We're now the kind of safer gambling training partner, if you like, of some pretty big organisations. So you've got Entain in there, you've got Flutter in there, you've got DraftKings in there. You've got probably 6 or 7 more, Kindred still. So we are working with them quite extensively. And, that's interesting because, at the start, we're in a company of people who predominantly had suffered gambling-related harm. That drew a little bit of criticism from certain quarters. How can you do that? Are you, why are you,
how can you take money from the industry, that kind of stuff?
Exactly. And I always say with this company that the most important work we do is probably with the kids. So we educate 14 to 24-year-old kids or university students or whatever, because that's stopping the next generation suffering this harm. That's helping them make more informed decisions. It's giving them that same education as they would do with drugs or alcohol or stranger danger or body image or all that kind of thing. So we think that's really important. But actually, the stuff that we do with the gambling industry around products, around advertising, around training the senior executive teams, including the board teams and stuff, we think is really important, because if you actually get that culture of safer gambling or harm prevention running through a business or running through a gambling organization, then you're actually stopping harm at source in the first place. So what better way to do it rather than just trying to pull people out of the stream further on down the line? So we're quite proud of that relationship because we know that we do it with the right intentions. We know we do it with the right messages. And actually, if you look at where the gambling industry is now compared to where it was in 2013, it's a completely different place. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's a different place from where it is now. And I always think back, would I be able to, with what happened with me, would I be able to happen now? I really don't think I would.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. I was going to be, it's trended in the right direction. I mean, obviously, I've been covering... because I remember back when I first started covering the industry back in 1998, and I was getting a bit of heat for covering what GamCare were doing at the time, because it just wasn't discussed. They didn't want it on the surface. It was all kind of in back rooms talking about that kind of stuff. But yeah, just the conversation in that time is just unrecognisable. It's pretty impressive. And what else is pretty impressive is how have you found yourself across 30 countries?
Well, that was interesting, actually, because obviously we were always known, and I suppose in some ways still are, for sort of face-to-face delivery, going and getting into a changing room or getting into an army barracks or getting into a bank or whatever. And, that's still the sort of gold standard, I guess, of what we present. But then, of course, something called COVID-19 came along and the pandemic came along in March 2020. And it was kind of, how are you going to survive this? You can't now go into changing rooms. You can't even go out your front door in some instances or outside the office. So how are we going to increase that? How are we going to sort of increase our reach and use this as an opportunity rather than something that sort of ends the business? And, we very quickly pivoted to a kind of digital proposition and started doing things online. And rather than it kind of stopping things, we kind of doubled in size over the course of the kind of 18 months of the May pandemic. And, we say we work in 30 countries. We probably work in sort of 7 or 8 mainly all the time. But during the course of the pandemic, we worked in Uruguay, we worked in Argentina, we worked in all kinds of countries that you would never probably have got to have worked in if you were just going face-to-face and the pandemic had never come along. We also, started doing some work remotely in sort of Australia, New Zealand, places like that, which has actually led to more face-to-face stuff afterwards. So, it led to some other opportunities that way. So when we say we worked in 30 countries, we have done sessions for teams in all those different countries. We're only a team of 46, so obviously we're not going to have a massive presence in every country all the time. And obviously our main focus at the moment is on America, where it's opening up very fast. But of course our stuff in the UK, Europe and so on continues as well. So yeah, it's an issue, I guess, that is worldwide. It's pretty non-discriminatory. It doesn't just affect the 6 sectors we work in. It doesn't just affect the 30 countries we work in. It can affect anybody at any time. But I suppose for Epic, we've got to make sure that we are making choices of going where we can make the most impact and where we are needed the most. And that's something that we keep asking ourselves a question about.
I mean, obviously, you've been going for 10 years. Are you talking about sort of the prevention side of things? How can you measure the effectiveness of what you're doing? What kind of KPIs do you work for to give you confidence that the method you're using is one that's been effective?
Yeah, so it's a really, really good question, because, of course, when you are a prevention organisation, we are never going to be able to sit here and say we've prevented 2,000 gambling addictions, or we've prevented 3,000, marriage breakdowns, or 2,000 imprisonments and stuff like that. All we can do is basically listen to our clients, go and do what we do, listen to the feedback, get the testimonials, continuously improve, And also a really important part of it is we research and evaluate every program that we do. So, that's from the stakeholders of people who attend the sessions, those who help plan it, those who are stakeholders around those different organizations like the EFL or a couple of the gambling operators or whoever. So all you can do is research, evaluate, get the feedback, develop your proposition and so on. And, we're that strange organization, really. And I say this to my guys all the time is that, there's nothing I would love more than to be able to lock the door, put the shutters down and say, Epic's closed. We're not needed anymore. Because that's the idea, isn't it? You want to prevent harm completely. And if that was the case and nobody was suffering harm, then there would be no need for us. So that's kind of the prophecy we're trying to do. We're trying to close ourselves down, but the reality is that demand for our services has probably never been higher. You look at America and how that's opening up at the moment, and we've got a big presence over there now, working with the NCAA, the NFL, MLB, people like that. But also when you look at the likes of Brazil and other big markets that are going to open, there's going to be a big need for the Epic side of it. And it's not anti-gambling. I don't think the message from Epic has ever been anti-gambling, but we are sort of very much dedicated to preventing harm from gambling. And wherever you go, whatever market, there will be some harm. And obviously regulation, advertising, things like that will play a big part of that. So yeah, for us, it's where do you concentrate your time and where can you make the biggest impact? And that's something that we're constantly asking ourselves a question for.
When it comes to the next 10 years for you, Paul, obviously things are changing a bit more in the UK market with the levy coming in from the social responsibility for problem gambling issues. And there's been sort of reports that majority of that money is going to the NHS. Where does Epic fit into what is this proposed new structure?
I think it's a good question, Andy, and I think it's completely up in the air at the moment. There's a big consultation going on. We've been a big part of that with the DCMS. We've got further meetings with them coming up. But, I think, yes, am I a supporter of statutory levy? In a theory, yes. In its current guise, probably not. I think it's very confused. I'm not sure how all the money going to the NHS can be a positive thing for the people who are going to need the help. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. But, the NHS, has proven to not always be the most efficient organisation. And I think the thing for me that I'm really only concerned about is how will a levy make sure that the maximum amount of people get the help that they need. Now, that's what it should all be about. There's a lot of egos involved in this space, I think, at the moment. There's a lot of fighting from different sides of the fence, if you like, between sort of people who want to ban gambling completely, right through to obviously the operators defending themselves, if you like, or their position. For me, the only thing that's important, the only thing that's ever been important for Epic has been, how do we prevent harm happening in the first place? If it does happen, which it inevitably will, then how do they get treated in the best way possible? And how is the research being done to make sure we actually understand the scale of the problem that we've got, or the scale of the problem that there is? Because I don't think there's been a truly accurate prevalence survey since at least 2012, if ever. So how do we know the problem? How do we prevent people having problems? How do we treat people effectively? And the one thing I would say with the NHS is they've got a very set way of treating gambling addiction. It's not the same for everybody. This isn't a one-size-fits-all addiction. And I think, for the NHS to say everybody should do this is wrong. We've got 24 people who have suffered serious gambling harm in Epic, and not everybody did the same thing. Some do GA, some went for private counselling, some did CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, some did psychotherapy. It's not a one-size-fits-all addiction. There isn't a one-size-fits-all treatment thing. So for me, there'd be, and this is what I've told the DCMS, it would be a massive, massive error to give everything to the NHS. Yes, they should play a pivotal part, but there should be at least 25% on prevention of gambling harm, 25% on research, and 50% on treatment. If we go to a model where it's 100% treatment or higher than 50%, you're actually going back a decade, and you're actually causing more harm than you're solving. So for me, there's a lot of work needs doing on this. And I think the last thing I'll make on that is it needs to be commissioned completely independently. And I'm not sure who's going to be able to do that, because everyone's so entrenched on one side of a fence or another. Who's going to actually make the decisions around who who gets the money for this, because it can't go to gambling campaigning or it can't go to political motivations or anything like that. It has to go to prevention, research and treatment of those people who are suffering harm. Otherwise, it's a completely failed system.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, it always had an underlying level of political interest, the treatment and the problem gambling side of things, but it seems to have just gone into overdrive over the last 5 years. And as you say, nobody's really concentrating on the end user and preventing harm and treating harm. At the moment, it just seems like people are just trying to win, and that's all that's important.
Yeah, agree.
Well, hopefully we can shake that out and go back to having natural, sensible conversations. Paul, I believe also it's your 12-year gambling free anniversary this week as well.
Yeah, as of 27th of November, it was 12 years. So a couple of days ago or yesterday, as we record this. So yeah, something I'm very proud of. Last bet was £2,400 on a favourite, 100 to 30 favourite, or 10 to 3 favourite. Yeah, and it lost as you'll probably expect. Didn't realise that would be my last bet, but a couple of different things happened in the days afterwards, which caused a few rock bottoms. But yeah, 27th of November 2011 was my last bet, and for anybody who's had any kind of addiction, I think it's always a special day. It's something which gives a mix of feelings in many ways. It certainly takes you back. But as every year passes, it feels a bigger and bigger achievement, I guess, to have put that part of history behind me and moved on.
Yeah, well, congratulations again, and congratulations on building Epic into such a wonderful success. Every year, it's more impressive than the last. So, congratulations again.
Thank you.
SBC Media.